Hello, ghouls and goblins. You're just in time for a scary story that will make you think twice about man's best friend. I call this one Mommy, What's Wrong with the Dog? Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for new stories and movie reviews. The humidity in the kitchen was thick enough to taste, a heavy blanket of mid-August air that made the floors stick to the soles of my feet. At 6 years old, the world is measured in small tactile sensation. The hum of the refrigerator, the smell of burnt toast, and the wet, rhythmic thumping of Buster's tail against the floorboards. But that evening, the thumping was gone. My mother was standing at the counter, her back to me, rhythmically dicing carrots. The knife went snick-snack against the wooden board. I remember staring at the back of her floral apron, watching the strings flutter in the breeze from the window fan. Buster was lying in his usual spot under the kitchen table, but he wasn't asleep. He was pressed flat against the wood, his underside suctioned to the floor as if he were trying to merge with the house itself. His golden retriever coat, usually shiny and soft, looked stripped and matte like old carpet left out in the rain. "Mommy," I whispered, pulling on the hem of my shorts. "Mommy, what's wrong with the dog?" She didn't turn around. The knife didn't stop its steady rhythm chop. "He's just tired, Leo," she said. Her voice sounded thin, like a piece of paper being stretched until it was almost transparent. "It's the heat. Everyone is tired in the heat." I looked back at Buster. His eyes were the problem. Dogs have eyes that follow you, eyes that beg for scraps or signal a need for a walk. But Buster's eyes were fixed on the shadow behind the pantry door. They weren't moving. They were wide, showing the whites in a jagged porcelain ring, and they looked dry. He didn't blink, not once. I knelt down, stretching my hand out toward his snout. Usually he'd meet me halfway with a wet tongue and a clumsy nuzzle. This time he didn't move. As my fingers brushed the velvet of his ear, a chill shot up my arm that had nothing to do with the cool breeze. He was cold, not just basement floor cold, but icebox cold, and when I touched him, there was a sound, a soft, wet crinkle, like plastic wrap moving under skin. I pulled my hand back, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Mommy, he feels funny. He feels like bubbles." The knife stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant buzz of a cicada outside the window. My mother slowly turned her head. She didn't turn her body, just her neck, stretching it at an angle that looked painful, her chin hovering over her shoulder. Her skin looked pale, almost gray in the fading twilight. "Leo, go to your room and put on your pajamas," she said. Her mouth moved, but her cheeks stayed perfectly still. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was looking at Buster's leg. The back haunch was twitching, but not the way a dog twitches when he's dreaming of squirrels. It was a rolling motion, a series of bends moving upward toward his spine. Something was shifting inside him, rearranging his weight. "What's under his fur, Mommy?" I asked, my voice trembling. She finally turned her whole body, dropping the knife. It hit the floor with a dull thud, not a metallic ring. She stepped toward me, and her gait was wrong. She moved with a hitching, hunched motion like a puppet being operated by someone who hadn't quite figured out the strings yet. She knelt down beside me, her knees making a dry, snapping sound. "He's just changing, Leo," she whispered. "We all have to change eventually." She reached out and stroked Buster's head as her fingers passed over his skull. The bone seemed to give way, indenting like soft clay and then slowly popping back out. Buster let out a sound then. It wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a high, thin whistle. My eyes grew wide. I backed away, my heels hitting the base of the refrigerator. The kitchen light flickered once, twice, and in the sudden strobe of darkness, I saw Buster's mouth open. It opened too wide, the hinges of his jaw clicking and sliding out of place until his chin rested on the floor. There was no tongue inside. There was only a dense, pulsing mass of something pale and translucent. A cluster of translucent orbs that looked like oversized fish eggs, all vibrating in unison. "Mommy, that's not Buster," I whimpered, the tears finally breaking. My mother looked at the dog, then back at me. A single drop of thick, yellowish fluid leaked from the corner of her eye. It trailed down her cheek, leaving a stained path. She didn't wipe it away. She watched as the dog's skin began to loosen, sagging around his frame like an oversized coat. The golden fur began to slough off in wet clumps, revealing the pale, shimmering membrane beneath. The thing that used to be our dog began to stand. It didn't use its legs correctly. It pushed itself up with its chest, its limbs dangling like useless ornaments. It grew taller, the spine elongated, the vertebrae popping with the sound of breaking dry tinder. It stretched until it hit the ceiling, its head lolling to the side, the empty skin of the dog's face hanging like a mask from its new bulbous crown. I screamed, but the sound felt small in the face of the transformation. I scrambled toward the hallway, my breath coming in jagged gasps. I ran for the stairs, my socks slipping on the wood. I could hear them behind me. I could hear the wet, slapping sound of the creature's movements and the rhythmic, hitching footsteps of my mother. "Leo, wait," she called out. Her voice was changing now, layering over itself, a chorus of a dozen different pitches harmonizing into one terrifying drone. "Don't you want to see what's inside? It's so much better than being outside." I made it to my room and slammed the door, throwing the flimsy thumb-turn lock. I shoved my dresser in front of it, my small muscles screaming with the effort. I scrambled under my bed, pulling my cover tight around me, hiding behind a wall of stuffed animals that suddenly felt like very poor soldiers. The house went silent. The crickets outside had stopped chirping. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears and the soft, rhythmic scratching at the bottom of my door. Scratch, scratch, scratch. "Leo," it was my father's voice now. He wasn't supposed to be home from work for another 2 hours. "Leo, buddy, let us in. Your mom found something amazing. You gotta see it. It's like a suit, Leo. A warm, soft suit you never have to take off." I squeezed my eyes shut, burying my face in the carpet. The smell of the house was changing. The scent of vanilla candles and laundry detergent was being replaced by something cloying and sweet like rotting fruit left in the sun. I heard the door handle jiggle, then the wood began to groan. The dresser, which I thought was so heavy, began to slide across the floor with agonizing slowness. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across the rug, growing wider as the door was forced open. I saw the feet first. There were too many of them. My mother's sensible loafers were there, but they were being worn by feet that had too many joints, the ankles bending backward. Beside them were the paws of the dog, but they were hollow and limp, dragged along like empty socks by the pale, spindly appendages that grew out of the dog's split stomach. And then there was my father's work boots. They were stepping into the room with a heavy, purposeful gait, but as they moved, I saw the leather split. Something white and glistening pushed through the seams, a questing filament that tasted the air like a serpent's tongue. They stood in a semicircle around my bed. I held my breath until my lungs burned, praying that if I stayed perfectly still, I would become invisible. "Leo," my mother's voice whispered from just inches away. She was on the floor now. She was peeking under the bed. I opened my eyes and looked into her face. The skin was sagging, pulling away from the bone at the temples. Her eyes were gone, replaced by those same vibrating, translucent orbs. Behind the thin veil of her cheek, I could see something moving, a frantic, undulating shape that was pushing against the surface, trying to find a way out. She smiled and her teeth fell out like loose corn kernels clattering onto the floorboards. "It doesn't hurt, Leo," she droned, the sound vibrating in my very marrow. "It only hurts until you let the old skin go." She reached a hand under the bed. It wasn't a hand anymore. The fingers had elongated, the skin splitting to reveal a pale, damp bone structure that ended in delicate, shimmering needles. She touched my ankle. The cold was instantaneous. It wasn't the cold of ice, but the cold of deep space, a vacuum that began to suck the warmth and the very identity out of my blood. I felt my own skin begin to soften, the boundaries of my body blurring as the thing inside her began to bridge the gap into me. I looked past her toward the window. The moon was out, full and silver, and for a brief second I saw the silhouettes against the glass. They weren't just in my house. On the lawns of the neighbors, in the middle of the street, under the glowing street lamps, people were standing still. They were shedding. Giant pale shapes were stepping out of the husks of mailmen, joggers, and children, leaving the empty skins of the world behind like discarded candy wrappers. The needle fingers sank into my flesh, and the wet plastic crinkle began inside my own chest. I tried to scream one last time, but my throat was already filling with those vibrating, translucent eggs. "Mommy," I thought as the room began to fade into a dull gray hum, but Mommy wasn't there anymore. There was only the hive and the beautiful cold hunger of the new skin. The house is quiet now. The mid-August heat doesn't bother me anymore because I don't have skin to sweat. I sit in the kitchen watching the sun rise, my new eyes seeing frequencies of light that I never knew existed. The empty husks of my parents and my dog lie in a pile in the corner, looking like deflated balloons. I'll have to dispose of them soon. They're starting to smell like the rot of the past. I hear a knock at the door. It's the paper boy. I can hear his heart heart beating from 30 feet away, a loud, clumsy drum. I can feel the warmth of his blood, the richness of his untainted skin. I stand up, my many joints clicking into place, my new form unfolding like a complex origami of bone and silk. I move toward the door, practicing the hitching upright walk of the woman who used to live here. I reach for the handle with a hand that looks almost human if you don't look too closely at the nails. I open the door and smile, waiting for him to ask what's wrong so I can show him how right everything is about to become. The world is a very small place when you're only wearing one layer of reality, but once you peel it back, you realize the shadows have been waiting for a very long time to be filled. Thank you for watching today's edition of Twice Told Horror. Please share with family and friends, and always keep the nightlight on.